There's a ton of uncertainty right now. Most factories, trade companies, suppliers in China, they will always say yes because they don't want to turn down any business. I mean, the major thing is don't just look at pricing. I think we all like to get a good deal, and it can be a bit of a trap.
Hi, welcome to the Better Batch podcast, where batch process manufacturers learn from industry experts. I'm Alex Koves.
And I'm Peter Suttard, and we're joined today with John Kyle Beaton from China Product Pros. John, we're so excited to have you here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, we're thrilled to have you. Okay, tell us a little bit more about your company and who brings you in and who you help.
Yeah, absolutely. So at China Product Pros, we help a wide range of clients. So anywhere from the startup phase client to established brands and manufacturers, sourcing at the best price and the best quality, finding that perfect mix. And it can be anything from raw materials like magnesium citrate we recently sourced for a supplement manufacturer, to finished goods like weighted blankets, to packaging like glass bottles, plastic bottles, product boxes. And we even source the packaging machines. So we helped another American client, a coffee roaster, source their bag filling machine, which was a lot of fun.
One question I would have, you mentioned a wide range of products. How would I think about which things could be sourced? Would it be just anything that's not like a short expiry shelf life? Or how would I think about that?
Sure. So I think typically like where China is at right now, most everything can be sourced from China. So I would look at pain points in the business. So it could be maybe you feel like you're paying too much for packaging, or you don't have a reliable supplier, or maybe the tariff uncertainty with the US and Canada. Let's say you're getting your packaging from the US and you're in Canada, or vice versa, then you may be forced to diversify. So I'd look across the business and look at different items. Usually what we recommend for anyone who's curious about finding products in China, we'll have a discussion with them and we'll try to pick out a starting point. And because part of the whole process is starting the process and seeing what is possible. But again, we have sourced many different product types, and there's a lot that you can get.
You kind of specifically mentioned tariffs there, and obviously everyone's talking about tariffs now. How do you generally advise clients to strategize around tariffs more generally?
Sure. So what we're advising right now is not to have a knee-jerk reaction. So try to be strategic and base it on your numbers. So there's a lot of noise out there in the news among industry partners for good reason. There's a ton of uncertainty right now, whether it's in North America or whether it's between China and the US. And so take that mid-range view and look to see, obviously put things in place to try to diversify. If you're completely 100% in a single country or with a single manufacturer for, let's say, your packaging, then you may want to look at diversifying that or starting those steps, and try to do that in advance. Again, I had a conversation just 2 days ago with a Canadian company who are looking at the proposed start date of, I think it's March 4th, for the new tariffs coming to effect, unless they push them back further. And they're like, man, we have a week left to try to figure out an alternate source. And so that's a bit down to the wire, but at the same time, it's hard to predict. So our biggest message is don't be overly reactive and try to be strategic, base it on your numbers.
Have you found an increase in people asking you for help and helping source externally because of all the tariff talk?
Absolutely. So in some ways, Peter, in other ways, no. So again, our major focus is China.
Sure.
So it's in our name, right?
Yeah.
China Product Pros. So it's our major focus. So we have seen a decrease in interest temporarily from the US, for example.
Interesting.
But what's interesting is that then from some American businesses, we see an increase in interest in then not just selling in the US, but bringing their products to Europe. So already businesses are pivoting. And the same thing's true. We see another example. We see more Canadian businesses that are coming to us for help importing from China because there's that uncertainty with their supply chain with the US. So it's ever evolving, but I mean, businesses will take what's handed, and good businesses, I think, will find that pivot point and look elsewhere.
Perfect. Okay, so let's say I'm a manufacturer. I'm looking to diversify into China, raw goods, packaging equipment, packaging goods, whatever it is. How do I start? How do I start finding factories in China?
Sure. So I'll start by saying I'm obviously really biased, but I think if you have the budget, hire a sourcing agency like us or someone else.
Sure.
It'll save you a ton of time and potential costly mistakes, right? So you can leverage our expertise and boots on the ground in China. If you want to do it yourself, you can absolutely do that as well. And so in that case, if you have the budget, I think a fair such as a Canton Fair or some of the specific industry or product category fairs around the Canton Fair are very interesting. If you can travel, if you have a week of time and you want to check out China, those are great. You can meet a lot of factories in person and get a lot done. I usually hear from people that go that they feel some really high ROI activity, and they also love the food as well. Mm-hmm. If you want to do it from afar and you want to DIY it, Alibaba is usually the starting point. It has the easiest access to start looking, but there are certainly red flags that you need to be careful on. One of the biggest ones on Alibaba is there's a lot of trading companies masquerading as factories, and it's really hard sometimes to figure out who is who. So a pro tip for anyone listening, there's a domestic version of Alibaba called 1688.com. And so on here, you can, with the help of Google page translation, it's all in Chinese.
Yeah.
Or if someone on your team speaks Chinese, you'll get the domestic pricing typically rather than the Western client-facing pricing you would get from Alibaba.
Cool.
That's a zinger.
What's the difference between a manufacturer and a trading company for people who don't know, including myself?
Yeah, absolutely. So a trading company is a middleman. So they have an office in a downtown core of a major city in China, and they are connecting the foreign buyers with factories. And they're adding in their own markup, of course, to cover their costs and make some profit.
And does that also maybe complicate the relationship around, okay, customizations, different things I want. Now I have a layer in communication and more mistakes?
In my opinion, Alex, absolutely. Absolutely complicates.
They're not adding value.
Yeah, I mean, if we think back to the childhood game of telephone, you whisper something in your buddy's ear, they whisper it to the next person, and once it gets to the 10th person, the message has changed. It's kind of like that, where the more layers you have, not only is the price greater, but you have that separation from the factory. And so we always encourage, go direct to factory as much as you can. More and more, like back in the day, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you almost had to go with trading companies because factories, they weren't set up to export. They weren't set up to be able to communicate in English effectively. But where we're at right now, a lot of factories have gotten there, and they have an English speaking sales team. They're able to export. And with the use of AI and translation tools, like really, there's nothing stopping you right now from going direct.
Cool. Now, I guess when we go direct and either working with a company like yours or trying to go it alone, do you kind of need to know exactly what you want from the start? Or is there room to like work in a consultative way with the manufacturer? Like what kind of, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
What amount of certainty and prior knowledge do you have to approach this?
Sure. So I would say if you're not quite sure what you want right now, you can absolutely start. So if you know you want to start sourcing, don't delay. Most factories will be able to work with you, and there'll be that consultative back and forth. It helps if you have some specifics, and it will take longer, of course, if you need to go through that iterative process with the factory. But most factories in China, that's something they're well known for, is that they have a high level of cooperation. So they're able to guide you through the process. That being said, make sure that you get to a point where you have a set list of specifications so that when you're putting, when you go to sampling, when you go to put in your purchase order, everything is crystal clear on what the product should be.
And you mentioned before, especially searching Alibaba, around the difference between a trading company and a factory. What other red flags should people be looking at as they start to explore with manufacturing plants deeper?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the major thing is don't just look at pricing. I think we all like to get a good deal, and it can be a bit of a trap. So you want to look at pricing, you want to look at payment terms, cash flow is big, right? You want to look at lead times, how long it'll take to get your products, quality, of course, communication ability. If you're asking them 3 questions, are they only answering 2 and leaving 1 out? Are they responding to you quickly? Are they cooperative? If you say that you want to do some customization, Are they like coming to bat and say, yeah, we can absolutely do that for you. This is the next step. Where are they located? So these are all different things we look at. Another thing to be careful of is in Chinese business culture, it's common to always hear yes. So the word yes. So usually most factories, trade companies, suppliers in China, they will always say yes because they don't want to turn down any business. So as someone sourcing, ask a lot of open-ended questions. So don't ask things like, do you make X product? But ask instead, what products do you make? Show me examples. How long have you made this product for? Because if you ask them if they make something, they might tell you yes, and then they'll turn around, they'll give it to their cousin in Anhui province who makes it, and unknowing to you, your order has been subcontracted out. And that is a whole host of issues that could come up.
Okay, so we've gone to a conference, a trade show, we've winnowed it down to a couple different manufacturing plants. How do we finalize that? You mentioned location. If I'm based in Canada or the US, why does the location in China matter? That was the first one that jumped out at me.
Yeah, it's a logistics thing. So you might get really good pricing from a factory, let's say in central China in the Sichuan province, right? But then, so you need to understand the location. If you have really good pricing, what does it mean for your shipping? If you have to haul it halfway across the country to the nearest port, then that pricing may not be as good as you thought.
Right. Okay, great.
And on that subject of shipping, how difficult is it to actually arrange the shipping and find the right deal on shipping and so on? Is that something the manufacturer is going to take care of, or that companies can expect to have to figure out themselves?
Sure. So most manufacturers in China will offer that full white glove service, but of course they're usually adding a markup. So I encourage, as you source in China, maybe for the first batch, if like you could go with your factory's freight forwarder, just for simplicity of things and knowing everything is going to get where it needs to go. But with time, you want to optimize for profitability and control. So of course, if we do it, Alex, we separate everything. We like to get very granular because that's where the profit savings are, right? So we would look at getting multiple quotes for shipments from third-party freight forwarders, not ones affiliated with the factory. That's another thing maybe I'll touch on just briefly.
Yeah.
So I see a lot of brands that only get a single quote and they go with it. And I know why. Like, you're busy, right? Business is busy. You want to move things forward. You're almost going out of stock and you need just to get it moving. But I'm telling you right now, like if you put in a process for someone on your team every single time to get 2, 3, 4 shipping quotes, you'll save thousands, if not tens of thousands or more every single year just by doing that. Yeah.
Amazing. And on the subject of timeline, right? So I guess two-part question. Part one is, if we decide now, okay, we have this component or material that we want to source, how long could I expect from the start of the process, say working with you guys, to having a vendor and having an order placed? And then when I place an order, what's kind of the range of times to fulfill it?
Sure. Okay. So the first step in the process is the research. So we understand the product. We go out and look what is out there in the market. And then we go to work reaching out to factories, vetting factories, shortlisting factories. And that first step culminates in very tailored quotes. So quotes including the cost, any mold cost, if it's a custom plastic or plastic component product, lead times, payment terms, and any other kind of details that are important before you move to the next phase. So that first phase of quoting usually takes anywhere from 1 to 3 weeks. The second phase of sampling or prototyping, if you're getting something simple, like let's say empty glass bottles, and you know exactly what you want, sampling's usually quite quick. If it's something off the shelf and the factory's already making it, it's just the time to get the sample, ship it to the US or Canada, Europe, wherever you're sending it to. So that's another 2-3 weeks, and then you add weeks to that. The more customized a product is, the longer that sampling and prototyping phase will take. So I would say it's a tough one to fully answer, but anywhere from 2 weeks up to maybe as many as 8 weeks if it's something that you need to go back and forth on iterations for. And then the final major step after sampling and prototyping, once you have a pre-production sample in hand that you're confident with and you're ready to move forward, is the negotiations or the final negotiations around purchase order placement. And so you're putting money down right? You're putting down your deposit. Production, it's very product specific, but it can be anywhere from a week to 45 to 60 days. So I would say this may sound a little overwhelming, but if you're out there, you're looking to source from China, the process can take like the entire process, including shipping to you for the first batch. I would budget 4 to 6 months if we're being conservative, and I like to be conservative around timelines.
Sure. The before we get to the negotiation part, any advice you have for people doing sampling as they review samples from factories?
Yeah, I have a few. So one way you can save cost and speed up the process is consolidation. So if you're sampling from 2 or 3 factories, instead of having the factories one by one shipped to you, we consolidate in our office in China. We take photos, we take videos. So whether we do that or you have someone else do that, it helps speed things up. You'll save courier costs and the iterations will flow a whole lot faster. So that's one.
Nice.
The second thing, be patient. There's some points in the sourcing process where you can hit that fast forward button, but you don't want to do it during sampling because it will come back to bite you in product quality, right? So be patient.
On the flip side, some people listening are co-manufacturers in North America. What are some impressive things that you've seen on the sampling phase that have differentiated potential factories, right? Here's something, if a co-packer's listening, what's something they could do to help their sample stand out a little bit more or get that competitive advantage?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's in the lead up. So it's twofold, two things, right? So one is, how strong is your communication with the factory? So have you given clear specs or have you arrived at clear specifications? It's kind of like the whole data thing, right? Garbage in, garbage out. So if you arrive at clear specifications, you should have a strong sample. So that's one. You want to look early on, Peter, at communication. Communication is so important with the Chinese factory. Do not overlook communication for pricing, payment terms, because it will create a nightmarish relationship where you'll be chasing someone, you'll be having delays throughout the process. So look for that. So a good factory in sampling is someone that has that capability in-house. So they're able to make the sample in-house. Sometimes for certain components, they may have to have subcontract that out, depending on the product type. But they're also someone that can clearly communicate that and get to the point of prototyping and set expectations. Yeah, so I think that's what I would say. Like, communication is huge. It's also really important to land on clear final specifications.
And around the sampling and prototyping and all of that, what kind of costs are typically involved in that process of actually going through, like pre-purchase, right? I just want to figure out whether it's a good fit.
Yeah, it's a great question because it's actually something that's often surprises people sourcing from China for the first time. So you may see that, let's take the glass bottle example. Let's say a glass bottle costs, 70 cents per bottle, but the sample cost will not be 70 cents. It'll be much, much higher, right? It might be 20 bucks, 30 bucks, 40 bucks for that sample. And the reason for that is because these factories, they get a lot of interest. It's in a mix of serious buyers and tire kickers, right? Like other people that are less serious. So they have to have some processes in place to weed through that. And one of them is by creating a bit of a barrier to entry with their sample costs, and helps to offset some of their overhead for that R&D that needs to happen to get to the sampling phase. So expect to have a much higher sample cost than the per unit cost. But the other thing too is that typically you're able to negotiate into your first purchase order a refund of that sample fee with the factory you go with.
Okay, I'm ready to go into negotiation. How do you feel?
Oh yeah, %.
Okay, we got someone we like, samples approved. We took our time in the samples part, so we feel really comfortable. How should companies approach negotiation with their Chinese partners now?
Yeah, so it's a gradual process, negotiations. Typically, you don't just get everything done at once. It's a conversation. So upfront, you need to be clear on what's important for you going in. Is it price? Is it payment terms? Is it a specific feature or aesthetic that's really, really important to get perfect for your customers? So you need to know the most important things for you, that when it comes time for you to possibly make concessions, that you know what you can make concessions on. At the same time, try to understand their side. So as you go through, try to understand what's important for them and ask a lot of questions. So let's say that you ask for a better price and they say, oh, geez, we really can't. Don't just take their answer at face value. Keep asking, like, why is that? Like, I'm curious, like, tell me more. Like, what are your challenges? And then they may tell you that, oh, the raw material costs have gone up for us by 30% in the last few months. Or the exchange rate right now isn't as favorable as it was 2 months ago. Or the labor cost for making your product is higher than most of our other products. Or it could be many different things, but it'll give you the answers you need to then further the conversation and try to get to a place where everyone's comfortable to move forward. The other thing, if I can add one more thing.
Please. Yeah, this is great.
I often see a lot of Western brands being very shy with negotiating. Like they don't want to rock the boat. I hear, I have a good enough price. It's fine. I don't want to upset anyone, but I'm here to tell you, if you're listening to this, like negotiation in China it's not a blood sport, but it's not far from it, and you can play the game. So I encourage you, like, be friendly in your negotiations, but at the same time, every single purchase order, negotiate better pricing, better terms, better quality, better lead times. That's the way they negotiate in China, and you will not ruin your relationship if you do the same. In fact, you might be considered a bit of a pushover if you only negotiate, let's say, every 3 years. So get in there and negotiate. It's something we do as well on behalf of clients.
Yeah.
If they want that to help.
Just mix it up a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It is a culture shift for sure. Having traveled, it's a lot of fun though, once you get into it.
So yeah, I mean, on the subject of negotiations, and you brought up communication, how much of an advantage or edge does it give someone to have a Chinese speaker on the team to actually conduct those communications?
Yeah. I think it's a major advantage, Alex. So even with AI and translation being better than ever, in fact, you have to be careful. Because sometimes, like, you might get a reply that had a lot of grammatical errors, and then you may want to follow up because I'm not sure if they understood. And now you get a reply that is perfect, right? Grammatically perfect English, covers everything, but it's still being filtered through a translation software, and the understanding on the other side of that may actually not be crystal clear. So pictures are still worth 1,000 words. Videos are even better. If you're communicating and you don't have a Chinese speaker on your team, try to use as many visuals as possible. Download WeChat. WeChat is where business happens in China. So you can download that app, try to do some video calls at any stage in the process. So if you're vetting manufacturers, get them into a video call. If you're currently in an order with a manufacturer, jump on video calls. It just really helps to confirm understanding if you don't have a Chinese speaker on your team.
Oh, that's fantastic. Just circling back as well, you mentioned one of the subjects of negotiation being quality. I'm curious, anything else you could say around ensuring quality and consistent quality, order to order, or when selecting the manufacturer, because that might be hard to determine from one sample what that's going to look like.
Yeah, absolutely. So we look at a few different things. So you can there's tools out there. There's a free one called Import Yeti, and you can look at manufacturers to see who else they have exported to. And that will increase your confidence quite a bit. If you see that they've exported to a major competitor that they have amazing quality, then you're feeling better for sure about your choice. But it comes back to asking questions. So ask questions, ask what their quality assurance process is. And if they're like, we keep good quality, we have a good check. Like if they give you a very vague answer, that's a bit of a red flag. A good factory will be able to give you a flow, will be able to show you their process. If you have the budget, I encourage do an audit. So we help brands go in and do an in-person audit in factories. Go to the factory, we're on the floor, we talk to the decision makers as well. And we put together like a comprehensive report of the factory situation. So if you're able to do that, I think that helps a lot too. So I think those are kind of a few things to look out for.
How often do you recommend auditing? So negotiations are over, we've got an established relationship. How often should I be going to the factory to take a look and doing those audits?
So it depends on your order size and your budget. If you're a large brand and you're putting in big orders, I would do it every single order, right? You want to ensure if your margins are there. You want to ensure product quality. So if you're going into a large order and you're putting that down deposit for the cost of an audit, which is usually around $500, give or take, it often makes sense to increase your confidence in the factory, in that you made the right choice in your partner. But a lot can be done from afar, Peter. I think the main thing so anyone listening, your team out there, just put a process in place. Like usually what we see is a lot of brands, again, they're very busy. They're busy in their operations, they're busy in marketing, they're busy in sales. And oftentimes these sub relationships with suppliers, they take a back seat. So we see a lot of brands, they only reach out when it's time to put in a PO or if there's a problem. And that's not enough. You need to maintain a better relationship. So you should have checkpoints. I would say if you have an order in and the order is going to take 6 weeks to manufacture, at least put in 2, if not 3 checkpoints to reach out to the factory, have a short call, ask where things are at, ask them to share photos, are challenges coming up, and it's going to help get you better quality, prevent delays, and also improve your profitability by having fewer returns.
Well, I was just going to say, and of course, disclaimer, not asking for legal advice exactly, but, curious on your experience where things go badly, maybe with a manufacturer. Of what value is the actual written contract in that scenario? Is it actually is there an opportunity to take legal action, or are you just really down to the nuts and bolts of well, I made sure I got paid for, or that I...
Sure.
Yeah, I kind of fumbled the way I asked that question. We're going to have to cut part of that.
Yeah, no, I completely... Oops. It's a good question. So risk management is very important. So the contract itself, it is tough to fully enforce. Unless, again, it all comes down to what type of budget do you have. If you have a large budget and you're able to afford getting a bilingual contract drafted, and then if an issue comes up, you're able to afford hiring an attorney in China to proceed into legal action against the factory, then go for it. A lot of brands may not have that budget, or they may not want to invest in that at an early stage. So there's a few things you can do in terms of risk management to try to avoid that worst case scenario. One of them, so I absolutely have a contract. A contract helps. So you put in your purchase order, there's something we help our clients with as well, as putting in their contracts. And it'll stipulate the terms and the expectations around the purchase order. If you have intellectual property you want to protect, let's say you have a customized design that doesn't exist on the market and you've put in a lot of time and effort to make that. So you could go into an N&N agreement with your factory. So that's an agreement that, again, it's not rock solid, but it sets a good precedent, right? So it sets a precedent with the factory that you're not someone that takes their IP lightly. And then the other thing is in payment terms. So payment terms are also important for risk mitigation. So you want to try, typically a down deposit's anywhere from 30-50%, and you want to try to get it as close to 30. If you have a large order, I would actually say negotiate for closer to 20 if you're able. And then over time, you can get better and better terms, but that's also a great way. Another way, let me know if this answer is going on too long.
This is great.
No, please.
I'm learning a ton.
Nice. Okay. Another way is as part of agreements, let's say you order 10,000 units to get a better per unit price. You put a 25% deposit on that. A lot of factories are flexible to allow you to only ship part of your units. So let's say you ship 5,000 units to the US, to your warehouse, and you hold 5,000 units with a factory that you have not yet paid the balance on. You only pay the balance when you ship. It's another common arrangement you can try to set up with your factory. So there's different strategies in risk mitigation. It's something we talk about quite a bit with clients because it's on their minds for sure. But overall, Alex, contracts are not that easily enforceable. And I encourage buyers out there to look at their risk mitigation in other ways as well, in addition to contracts.
Makes sense.
On the shipping front, you kind of mentioned before where we want to, we have to evaluate factories holistically from their location to getting it shipped to our doorsteps here. What kind of strategies are there around shipping that people should be aware of? I imagine we could save a ton of money around that.
Yeah, absolutely. So pre-planning is always your best friend in shipping. Whenever you're in a rush, you're going to pay more, right? So shipping options, typically you have boat or you have air. Boat breaks down into, so you have your less than container load, your full container load, and then you have also a fast boat and a slow boat. The best way to save money is with pre-planning so that you can take the slow boat. That's going to be your best bang for the buck. If you're in a rush, you'll be forced maybe to air it. And that could be a very expensive courier or maybe freight or maybe express air freight. So pre-planning is big in terms of shipping. Shop around. So coming back to an earlier point, don't just get a single quote. Don't just get especially don't just get your factory's quote because they will have added in their own markup. Get multiple quotes.
In the context of taking the slow boat and everything else, we talked about that lead time initially of like, I have, now I'm placing an order. I guess the question is, what can you expect around delays, right? How frequent is it to get that email that says, yeah, we weren't able to process it this week and now it's on the schedule for next week. And then does that get bumped again and so on? Or to what degree can you actually count on a schedule being followed?
Yeah, great question. So delays do happen. In our contracts, we always try to put in some punitive measures for delays. And so that's in a percentage that the factory would remove from your balance should the product be delayed more than a week to 10 days and it's not an act of God or something that was completely out of their control. So this helps. Oftentimes, whether it's another thing, just coming back to an earlier point, is when it comes to product quality, you can also put in an agreement where any manufacturer defect products will be replaced with additional products on the next purchase order. So these types they're punitive, but at the same time, they're extremely effective. The factory does not want to lose that money, and a lot of brands don't do it. So if it's between, let's say there's 4 brands purchase orders that are all close to the finish line, and you're the one that has a strong contract, and they think you'll enforce that, then guess whose order they'll try to push through first, right?
Right. Fantastic.
Makes total sense.
So we've got a partner chugging away product for us in China, shipping it ahead of time. We're planning that out. Everything's fantastic. How do we maintain that relationship with these facilities over time?
Yeah. So the very king of all tips is visit in person. Whenever you can, if you have a strong relationship, if you're doing good volume, nothing beats rolling up in person. You'll have a great time. It'll take you out for a nice meal. You might go to karaoke. You might get a foot massage. But there's no better way to chat with your factory. And in terms of negotiations, it is the very best way to negotiate. And we have found that you will get far more concessions or favorable terms from the factory in person. So go in person if you can. Get WeChat. We talked about that already.
Right. Yeah.
WeChat's big. Email's slow. You can still email, but expect slower responses. It's almost kind of troubling, Peter, because WeChat, you'll sometimes get a response at hour 2 p.m. and you feel bad. You're like, no,
sure.
I you should sleep.
Yeah. It's 2 a.m.
Yeah, exactly. The other important thing is don't just talk to your sales rep. Ask at certain points to have a chat with some of the decision makers so that when the time comes, if there's a big issue or a big opportunity, that you know who to connect with, usually on WeChat, directly.
Right.
So don't just talk to your sales rep. Try to get the owners or those higher up in your contact list as well.
Also in the context of these relationships over time, and of course, the more you order, you're going to get a volume discount and all that. At what point do you feel it's cost justified to have multiple vendors within China for the same material? Like when do you look to get that kind of redundancy?
Yeah, no, great question. It will very much depend on the volumes and the product type. I would say it's always good. Okay, let's take an example. You've been ordering from China, you're doing volumes in the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of units, and you've been working with a single partner for over a year, and things are going smoothly. Things may not always go smoothly. So I would say at that point, it's good to have a backup supplier. And you may not start putting in orders, or even better, you could put in a trial order to kind of warm them up, because a few things can happen, right? So one, maybe as you continue to scale and grow, your major partner does not have the capacity to grow with you. They may be capped. So then you have to roll over to a new partner. So I would look at your growth plans, Alex, but if you're established, you're doing in the volume of tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of units, probably makes sense to start diversifying earlier. The other thing too, it works good for negotiation, because then if you're putting in a PO of, I wonder what factory B would charge me for it. And then you have some play there that you don't have if you just have a single factory.
Some people listening are on the flip side of this. They are co-manufacturers in North America, losing business potentially to factories in China as people develop kind of more partners. What are things North American co-manufacturers can be doing to be more competitive against China? What is it that the Chinese companies are doing better?
Sure. So aside from price, I think Chinese companies are exceptionally good at the sales process. They are the fastest in the world to respond, and the ease of communication is there. So they will say, hey, do you want to chat on WhatsApp? So for a lot of people, busy business owners, they might only have 5 minutes at their daughter's softball game to be able to have a conversation, right? So, and then flexibility on MOQs, so minimum order quantities. You have, we see a lot of clients come to us because they knocked at the doors of American manufacturers or Canadian ones, and the MOQs were just prohibitively high. So a good example is we're working with a brand right now to make sanitary pads from China. They had looked in Canada first, but the lowest MOQ was 100,000 units. And they talked to a lot of different manufacturing partners. Ultimately, they were happy to place an order for 50,000 units, but I don't think the conversations with those manufacturers progressed to the stage where that was found out. So I'd say if you're able to increase your communication channels and choice to offer that flexibility, speed of communication, if it's taking longer than a day, that's way too long, in my opinion, compared to Chinese manufacturers. And if you have flexibility, I know it's tricky with raw materials and everything on MOQs. I think especially now with today's business uncertainty, a lot of brands we see, they're more conservative than they were before, and they're doing less new product launches. And if they're working with a new partner, they're not putting that order for 5,000 units. They're saying, hey, could we try 1,000 to start? And then we'll scale. So I think a combination of those things.
Very cool.
Fantastic. Yeah. I'm out on this section, Peter.
I'm absolutely out on everything. Yes. Do you have any other questions for JK?
No. I mean, it's been fantastic, JK. And, maybe any other closing remarks, anything else, pitfalls, mistakes, other advantages, anything we didn't cover as we close out?
I think we did a pretty good job, and you both had great questions.
Wow. Well, thank you. We tried so hard. We think you did a great job.
Well, thank you.
If people want to get in touch with you, JK, where can they find you?
Yeah, so I'm happy to continue the conversation. If something stood out to you that you want to chat on more and reach out, so you can reach out to me through our website at chinaproductpros.com, or I'm also very active on LinkedIn. You can find me through my name at John Kyle Beaton on there.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a great day.
Thank you. Usual. See you guys.
Thanks for watching the Better Batch podcast. We're so happy you could join us. If you've got an idea for show ideas or you just want to improve your manufacturing, reach out to us and we'd love to hear from you.